welcome, welcome. You're listening to My Coffee Conversation here at Root Ranger TV, powered by Strong Island Entertainment. I'm your host, Yolanda.
I'm Delicia, and I'm just glad to be here tonight with you guys, a part of the Coffee Conversation team for the first time live.
We
So
are
just
happy
have
to
to be
have
here.
you. We
Thank
definitely
you,
happy to
thank
have you.
you.
You already know
Yes.
I'm Danny the co-host. Back with another show. Let's go.
Right?
Not the co-host.
Right?
Wait a minute. So I ain't saying it
Yeah,
again because I ain't
yeah.
know. I'm not.
Yeah,
Yeah,
who
well,
the
I
main?
am the main host. I'm not being the main
All
host.
right,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'll be the main host.
Better
You gotta
be
be
the
who you
main
are.
one.
You know what I'm saying? You gotta be real. True
Right,
to yourself.
be true to
Be who you
yourself.
are. Yeah.
That's it. I hope everyone had a wonderful Thanksgiving. I know I did. I ate a lot. Well,
Yeah, well,
I ate a lot.
I tried to, Dan. You know what happened? I went upstate, and when I came back down, there were no leftovers.
Well, I mean, it's like a tribe up
None.
back at the house, so you don't get no leftovers. But one thing I do know is that a situation came about, and one thing I hate is that when people are unhappy, especially around the holidays. But I really hate to see anyone unhappy at any time, you know. But I had to take a step back, and I had to understand that how hard it is to get out of bed with your past.
Wow.
I know, right?
Wow.
Jeez.
Getting out of wow.
Yes, and that's how I felt. I was like, hold up, that's like when you get that little smoke going, you get that little buzz with your little alcohol, and somebody come in and hit you with something serious. You be like, wow, you just messed
Yeah.
my buzz up.
You serious?
That's how.
Yeah. Not right now.
Not right now. So that's the way I felt. But I was like, wow, it is kind of hard to get out of bed with your past. You know what I mean? And I don't know if our listeners actually understand what we mean by that, by getting out of bed with your past. So I don't know. Maybe have you guys ever been in bed with your past? Do you know someone that's in bed with their past?
Yeah, I have. I've been in bed with my past. And you have to really recognize that you are in bed with your past to start getting out of bed with your past, essentially. And the way that I recognized that I was in bed with my past is that I kept picking the same toxic relationships.
Okay, all right.
So that was something that I had to get out of bed with my past.
Okay, all
you
right.
know,
So Daniel, you ever,
I mean,
you always in bed
you
with
know,
your past?
you know you in bed with your past when you wake up the next morning and the same girl there. Nah, I was saying. You're like, oh, you from last night, you the past.
You laughing?
I feel like it depends on how you look at the woman. If you look at her, if you want her to be your future, there's no way that she could be your past. So
Right.
it just depends on how you feel about her. If you like her, whatever, then it's your future.
Right.
But if not, if you don't have no feelings, one night stand, whatever the case is, then it's just your past. So
Right.
you just move accordingly after that.
Right, but the thing is that being in bed with your past doesn't necessarily mean that, or it has to be based on a relationship.
no, it doesn't.
You could
It
actually
doesn't.
be in bed with your past from things that happened in your past. Like
Yes.
some people just can't get over it. Like some people who may have been abused as a child, beaten. Let's say they were beaten as a child. And sometimes they stay in that bed for so long that now
Yes.
they become an abuser to their children.
Yes.
So some people never
Yes.
or don't understand that they are still
stuck,
in
yeah.
bed with their past. They're stuck there.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be a relationship. It could actually be something of an emotional trauma
Mm-hmm.
that they have went through.
And I think too, whatever the situation is, I think sometimes that we run from the past instead of sitting in the past and dealing with the past. And if it's not taken care of, you are going to revisit it. You are going to get back into bed with it,
Right.
because it has not been
resolved.
It hasn't been resolved.
Right,
You know what I
exactly.
mean?
And sometimes when you think that you have gotten it under control, you wind up staying there a little longer than what you than need be.
Than need
you
be,
know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Because sometimes people are like, well, I can't forget. Okay, and some things you don't need to forget
Yeah.
because it helps
Some
you
things you need to
along your
remember
journey,
to
right?
to make the right decisions moving forward. Something you
I
need
mean,
to remember.
sometimes it depends on what that person doing to make you jump back in that bed.
Well, is it what the person is doing, or is it something that you still, like I said, haven't resolved? Because once your issue is resolved, then you, no matter what entices you, you're not gonna get back in bed with it
Right. No,
if it's resolved.
right, but that's what I'm saying is that sometimes we don't realize
Mm-hmm.
that, certain situations are resolved.
Oh,
Like I
yeah.
said, sometimes when you're abused as a child,
Mm-hmm.
you don't really understand when you become that abuser. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And then when you reflect back, and like I say, some people go for therapy,
Mm-hmm.
and they reflect back, they say, oh, because I was abused as a child, so now this is the way that I was taught. This is the way the things that happened to me,
Mm-hmm.
not knowing that because you were in that bed and you didn't resolve that issue of
You're continuing
right,
that
that you're
cycle.
continuing
You're
that
continuing
cycle.
that cycle.
So it's saying, wow, how do I recognize that I'm
Mm-hmm.
still in bed with my past?
Mm-hmm.
Even like your situation, you said you knew that you was in bed with your past because you kept getting the same kind of getting in the same kind of
Yes.
relationship. So that's the same concept. You never resolved that issue with
Issue.
whatever ex that was. You just kept
Yes.
the same cycle just
Yes.
kept
Kept
going
You
and
going.
picking
going
Kept
the
and
same
going.
going.
person.
Yeah.
You
Right.
picking the
Kept
same kind
going.
of person.
Right,
So
because
I had to step back and say, why am I picking this type of person?
right,
What
exactly.
happened in my past that would make me pick this type of person?
Right.
And I think a lot of it has to do with what your example of, especially a female as a father.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of move towards that even subconsciously, and
Mm-hmm.
I just had to recognize that and move forward from that.
Right. And and I totally understand that because,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so I think when I speak to other women, a lot of us deal with a lot of daddy issues. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? And I was looking for that person,
Mm-hmm.
and of
and,
that
and, and
father
that's and
image
that's a
in
hard
that
one,
person.
and that's a
Yeah,
hard one because a lot of
exactly.
times we don't recognize that is what it is, and even for men too.
Oh, we got
You
a
know what I mean?
call.
Mm-hmm.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
Hello, you have reached Coffee Conversations. Caller, you want to state your name and where you calling from?
Hey, it's Shay.
Hey,
Hey
Shay.
Hey,
Shay,
Shay.
I'm calling from Queens. Hi, Pam.
All
Queen,
how
right,
let's
are
the
get the
Queen's in the
money.
house.
So I have a question. Well, first I want to just let you guys know that you're doing like an amazing job.
thank you so
I
much.
love
Thank
listening to you
you.
guys, hearing your
Yeah.
discussions. You guys are doing a fantastic job. So great job to you guys.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
So
you.
your discussion tonight about being like in bed with your past and being able to move on from that stuff. My question is, do you think that forgiveness is a big part of that, like moving on from your past? Do you think that forgiveness is needed to move on, or do you think that you can move on from certain traumas without, forgiving that person or whatever the situation was?
What, who you want me to answer that? Oh, well, I feel like you can actually, forgiveness does play a major part in moving on with your past, but I don't feel that you need that forgiveness from that person
Yes.
in order to move
Yes.
on. I believe that you're able to forgive without being asked to be forgiven.
Yes.
To be able to move on in your future. Because
And
if you don't, I don't feel like anything
you can
you can't
really
resolve
we
it
can't
within
resolve
yourself.
it. And just because and one thing that I had to learn is just in the part of forgiving does not mean that you have to stay in proximity or close to those toxic situations.
Right,
You know what
exactly.
I mean? So
Right.
forgiveness does not mean that you have to stay around. You
So
can you can
forgiveness
forgive.
doesn't mean reentry.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
But
exactly.
I think it depends on what type of person you are also, because some people need forgive for closure. So you got some people that will forgive for closure so they can move on. Then you got some people that could forgive so they can move on with the same person.
Right,
So
okay.
it's like
Okay.
it just depends on who you are and what you want to do, what route you want to take.
in the
Right.
situation.
Right, but
You
you
know what I
don't,
mean?
but don't feel like you can't move on if that person doesn't ask for forgiveness
Exactly.
or
Of course.
acknowledge what they
What they have
did,
done,
right, what they have done in your
and a lot
life.
of people get hung up on that. They
Right.
want the apology so much, that they can't move on.
Right. They feel like the person, the situation can't be rectified, but it can be rectified within yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was an excellent question.
I hope we answered your
I
question.
hope we
Shay.
answered your question, Shay.
Yes, definitely. Thank you guys. Looking forward to hearing some more of the conversation.
No
Oh,
problem.
thank you. Thank you for
Thank
calling
you for
in.
calling.
Thank you. Good
She,
night.
she didn't say espresso.
Another caller.
We got another
Somebody
caller.
calling in.
Coffee conversation throwing up the steam tonight.
Let's go.
Welcome. You have reached My Coffee Conversations. Call up and state your name and where you're calling from.
Yes, good evening. This is Jose from I'm from the Bronx, New York, but I'm currently stationed in Fort Worth, Texas. I'm just calling to say what's up to my boy Danny. We've been
Jose,
stationed
what's
together
up, man?
in
What's up?
Washington State.
Thank you for calling in. Thank
Definitely.
you. The Bronx is representing
Bronx in the
tonight.
house.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah, I just want to say what's up. The show was awesome. I was listening to it while I was guzzling down some soup because it's cold out here, as y'all know.
Yes,
Say hello,
stay warm.
That's right. It is. It's cold here.
Right?
You got a question for us, Jose?
Nah, I just wanted to say I love what you guys are talking about. I think it's a good it's a good show from what I've seen. So just keep it up.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
man.
Thank
We
you. We
appreciate
appreciate you.
Definitely.
All right, have a good night.
All
Thank
right,
you,
man.
too.
Take care.
Good night.
All right. Bye.
That's great, right? So that was an excellent question that Shay had asked, about being able to forgive,
Yeah.
or people not being able to move on because they're waiting for that
Yeah.
that
That's definitely a big
forgiveness.
thing now,
you
too.
know,
Yeah,
Yeah, like-
it really
Right,
is.
it is.
And I had to learn that too. Like, I'm not gonna get an apology. So
Right,
I just
exactly.
gotta
You're
move
not.
on.
And then honestly, you kind of keep that person in bed with you.
Yeah,
you
when
know,
you
when
are
you're
looking
waiting.
for that, when you're
Right,
waiting,
exactly.
yeah. So
in your,
you
in
really
your bed,
that,
in
you
your
really
mom,
have
Right.
at
yeah.
work,
Right.
everywhere. Like,
Yeah.
some people need that.
Yeah.
That's
They be in
right.
the next relationship like still
Yeah.
like I need my closure.
Right.
So it's like
Yeah.
it just like I said, it depends on who you are.
So that's what I mean. That's how they stand in bed with that because now you're in a whole new relationship, but you
Yeah, but
cannot.
you're holding
right,
on
you're
to
holding
that.
on. So that means you're still,
You're
in,
still
bed
in bed with
your
your
past.
past.
Exactly. So it's like how are you able to move forward when it comes to that? Like how do you I mean, I know some people say you should go to therapy, but a lot of us unfortunately
Go see the priest.
go see the priest.
I mean, I would pray. Pray about it. Just try to stay away from those triggers that would take you back, put you back in that bed. Try to stay away
Right.
from those triggers. If you, for instance, and I'm going to go back to relationships again.
Another
Oh,
caller.
Al.
Let's get it. We booming tonight.
Right?
Welcome. You have reached My Coffee Conversations. Caller, would you like to state your name and where you're calling from?
This is Miracle, and I'm from the Bronx. Hello, everybody.
Hello,
in
the
the
Bronx is
building,
in
man.
the building.
Guess what? Espresso.
Oh, okay.
Somebody want a gift.
All right, somebody gonna get a free gift. You
want a
better go
gift.
ahead, Miracle.
No, I want to tell you guys the daddy issues so on point. I could totally relate. I have experience with that. I lost my father when I was very young.
Oh, sorry to
I
hear
was
that.
in my mind. I had to find that same kind of love, and it put me like in a position where I was very, very thirsty, but for that kind of love where you're like on top of the world. And I entered a lot of toxic relationships. So after I did some soul searching and developed myself, sometimes also it plays in with the forgiveness. I feel that when you can't get that apology from somebody, you learn to take accountability and actually forgive yourself. Because if you don't forgive yourself for putting yourself into those situations, you're blaming everybody else for it. So
Yes.
when you could be in bed with the past, I've done it several times, and you got to just learn, like, hey, you know what? Where is this coming from? How can I fix this?
Right.
You know what I mean? And if you don't need the other person to fix it. Sometimes you just got to do it within yourself and then just keep it pushing, you know? So
Right.
Yes.
So what do you do when you start to, recollect and you find yourself slipping back into that bed?
Okay, so if I do that, it's because if I'm going back to that same situation, I feel like there's more learning to do.
Okay.
When you keep revisiting the past, there's something else that you have to learn. You obviously being called to that person for a reason, and you're not going to get away until you learn your lesson. And sometimes you got to learn your lesson the hard way. Sometimes it takes a little tough love or a tough experience to go through to grow.
Yeah,
Because
sometimes it takes
lessons
something
are
to
blessings
happen.
in disguise. That's how I learned. Like I learned that for myself, and I'm very grateful for every experience I had, and I just honor it. I honor the bad and the good. So
Okay.
the daddy issues definitely checks home. I think you guys are doing great.
Thank you.
And espresso. in case you
How many years you trying to get?
Right,
No
you
matter how
got
many
it.
times you say it,
trying to
sweetheart, you get one gift.
Don't worry, Miracle. We appreciate you, and your gift will be on its way.
Thank you for calling.
Thank you so much for calling.
Good luck, guys.
Thank
Bye.
you. Good night. Wow,
Good night.
that's on point. I'm
Yeah.
glad that she called in.
Yeah, and it shows you that experiences,
Yes.
circumstances in your life will sometimes cause you to get out of bed.
Right,
Sometimes
exactly.
it's in your face where you don't have a choice.
Right,
Like,
but
yeah.
the good part about that is the fact that she was able to miss her dad and still remember her dad, but not allow it to affect her future with her relationships. Because we're not saying getting out of the bed means to forget your loved
Exactly.
ones
Yeah,
or to not, to
Exactly.
not think about them. But she was able to understand. Now I'm taking that as, when it comes to dealing with my relationship. So
Yes.
now she's going to be able to separate the two where she could still think about her dad and honor her dad and remember those memories without trying to drag it into her
Yeah.
it into her relationship.
Definitely.
So that was like an excellent point that we are able to get out of our get out of the bed with our past, meaning we're going to reiterate this, meaning that we're getting out of the negative part of our past.
Yes, the negative part of.
We're getting out of the negative part of
good.
Yes, yes.
our past because a lot of times, with me revisiting, even with my mom, because, of course I lost my mom and I go back and sometimes I have to catch myself because I could become depressed
Yes.
easily when I
Yes.
start thinking about my mom.
Yes.
So I have to catch myself that if I get in that bed, because at that time it feels like a little comfort zone,
zone,
thinking about
yeah.
her and thinking about the things that she would do, that I could find myself staying there.
Yeah.
I could find
And
myself
you-
staying there,
yeah.
balled up somewhere, and becoming
Easily.
easily.
Easily when it
I mean, that depend on who you talking about anyway. Because usually when you talking about an ex or something like that, it's usually negative. So it's like if you're talking about a family member, it's different because you can speak of them, you can stay in the bed with them, like not literally, but
All right.
you can stay in the bed with them, but bring up positive memories and say,
Right.
"This my dad used to do this, my grandma used to do this, my mom used to do this."
Yeah.
So you could bring up positive things, so it doesn't interfere with your life. But usually when you're talking about an ex, something like that, it's usually not really good. So
That's
you
true.
definitely want to try to not be in bed with your past when it comes to that.
Right.
Because it's
True.
going to affect your role, like what you want to do, because it's going to be stuck. Like I said, everywhere you go, work, all of that, you're going to
Right.
be stuck because you're going to be thinking about that, and you're going to
Yeah.
be stagnant, whatever you're doing.
Right,
So,
but that's why we said you want to get out of the negative part
Yeah.
of getting out of bed, because sometimes you could have a recollection of a parent and
Yeah.
it don't always have to be a
Yeah.
good one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you could-
so
yeah.
you could be stuck there,
Yeah, you could be-
and then
yeah.
you can be taking that along with you,
you.
and that's not a good thing. Just because it is a relative, some relatives are not nice.
Yeah, because I know of a situation where I know a person whose household was not a happy household. And that person brought the unhappiness to his household. And everybody else, in the world was just, he was happy-go-lucky with, but his home life, because of the abuse in his home life, he could not get out of bed with his past.
Right.
And eventually ended up ruining his family.
Right.
Ruining his family. So, you really have to, it depends on, like she said, it could be a parent, you know what
Right,
I mean?
it definitely-
And relationship-wise, you have to look at, back on your past relationships and say, what can I take out of this? What am I not going to do going forward? into the next relationship. You know, you have to turn that negative into a positive as well.
You gotta look in the mirror. You gotta look in the mirror
Yeah.
and see,
Right.
and see
Yeah.
what you're doing wrong. Because
Right.
it's not always something
The
else. You know,
outside,
you go in
yeah.
a relationship. You gotta look in the mirror and be like, "Damn, what you doing?"
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
It might be.
what
It
am I
might be
in
you.
bed with?
Right.
What am I
Because
still
you-
in bed with? You
Right,
know?
because you could be in the bed by yourself.
Like, yeah, exactly. By yourself.
It's you
Yes.
that
yes.
has this
and that's why
problem.
no one is around you. You know?
Exactly. That's why you keep
Seriously.
being in
You
the bed
start
by
asking,
yourself.
like, why they in the bed with me?
Yeah, right.
Like,
Exactly. So
Right.
we have to always look at that because just as Miracle from the Bronx,
Right.
remind me. I'm sorry, I don't mean to get on track, but it reminded me of Billy Blanco from the
From the
Bronx.
Beanie Blanco.
what was that movie?
The youngins
it?
don't know about that.
You don't remember that movie?
I don't know. I can't remember what movie it was. I remember Billy Blanco.
Yeah, it was
I don't
Billy-
what
remember-
movie.
Yeah, I remember
Movie.
Billy Blanco.
But you don't
Forgot
remember the
I know my
movie?
man
Yeah.
Al Pacino was in it.
Yeah. So if anybody know that
Yeah.
movie, they call in, they get a free
call
gift
in,
too,
yeah, you get a
and tell
free
us the
gift, too.
movie where that come
Where
from.
my movie has
That's
that.
right.
Right.
Billy Blanco from. They better think of it
From the
before I
Bronx,
do
right?
that.
I know, 'cause
I'm
I'm
usually
thinking
good with the
usually
movies
good for
too.
that- with that.
Gosh, right? I'm
But it
good with
wasn't
the movies.
Scarface, was it?
Nah, it wasn't.
Oh, I know, because I never really watched that. But yeah, I remember. I'm usually good with those movies. So
Yeah,
anybody
me too.
call in with Billy Blanco, where that came from,
Yeah.
you know, let us know.
Yeah,
But
that's gonna be stuck in my head.
I think that's why I got Billy Blanco.
Somebody got
Somebody
it.
got
They
Billy.
would make us give away all our prizes.
Welcome. You have reached My Coffee Conversations. Call it. Want to state your name and where you calling from?
Yup, it's Shay again.
Hey, Shay.
Carlito's Way is the name of the movie.
Carlito's Way. That's
Yes,
what it is.
wait,
All right, Shay, you
all
got
right,
it.
you got it. Google
got
worked
it.
for you.
Right.
Wait, hold up. You
No,
sure?
it didn't. I knew. I Google it. I knew it.
She didn't know it. She didn't say espresso. She like, I'm getting my gift tonight.
She called back. She was like, I gotta get me some.
You right, Carlito's Way.
Yeah.
Oh man, I don't know how I missed that.
I couldn't get it.
Yeah, I wouldn't
couldn't get it.
have
don't know
remembered
why.
that.
No, I couldn't remember that either. Well, thank you, Shay, for calling in from Queens.
Right.
Even though you're not from the Bronx.
Queens
all right.
representing.
That's Queens represented. So okay. You got that one. That was
Yeah,
great.
that was
Thank you.
good.
Thank you so much for that.
Thanks.
That was good.
You know what? I'm gonna go get her some Coochie Fritos. I'm gonna get her some Coochie Fritos.
That's some good stuff.
That's right. That's some good stuff.
Coochie
That's why I said you
That's
get some
some
Coochie
cheesy
Fritos.
Fritos.
That's right. So, but now I forgot what I was saying because I got caught on that with
Carlito's Way.
With Carlito's
You
Way.
got me thinking about rice and beans now.
Oh, gosh.
no, what's that coconut drink?
That too.
Oh, that coconut drink is. You know what? We gonna do it off the
Coconut
top.
water, pina colada.
No, the
What kind of drink you talking
Nah,
about?
it's just coconut.
It's a coconut, yeah, but
Okay.
it's really a good.
Okay.
It's delicious.
Okay.
But yeah. So anyway, back to what we were saying. I really feel like it's so important that we
And
stay
happiness
out.
is yes,
Happiness
happiness
the
is out
key.
there when you jump out of that bed.
When you jump out of that
yeah,
bed.
you can focus. You'll start to live a whole new life.
Yeah.
You know, it
Another
really
thing is
important.
another thing is rectifying it, like what's going on, because a lot of times when you in the middle of it, you don't see it. So it's like the hardest part is actually getting out of the bed, like we've been talking about. But when it's hard to get out when you don't
When
see
you
it
don't
because
see
you don't
it.
really think
Yeah.
nothing is wrong.
Right,
Until it's
exactly.
happening over and over again.
Yeah.
And you finally get to a point where it's like, I'm tired of this.
Yes.
Then when you get out of it, you start seeing everything that was wrong. Like, why
Yes.
was I in that?
Yes.
Yes.
Like,
What was I
Right when it,
thinking?
it's like when
What was
when,
I thinking?
when, the,
What was
when,
I
it been, when
doing?
everything done been cleared up,
Cleared up.
right?
Yeah,
You
it's
start
like,
thinking of what was I
what?
doing?
Clearly now.
Wait a minute now. Wait a minute now. Wait a minute.
Somebody trying to get signed.
Right? You know what? I do want to thank the people that have joined our conversation. Vanessa, Christopher, Ron, Desmond, Rachel. I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
right. We have
awesome.
some. Yeah, I want to give a shout out to them and tell them thank you so much for joining us today on our conversation.
Facts.
On
Everybody
right.
that tuned in,
That
called
called
in.
in.
We had the phones booming.
Yeah,
I appreciate
I'm
y'all,
telling you,
definitely.
definitely. You know, and it don't stop. It just can't
Yeah.
stop, won't stop.
Can't stop.
won't
Can't stop, won't stop.
Take that.
Right?
You know, and it's more fun times to come. I know it because it's always fun times when you got coffee.
Yes.
I just want people to know that.
Always.
Yeah.
Whatever you got in it, it's always fun
Always
times.
fun. right? No matter
me
what
awake.
happens, that's it. Now, well, when you sit in these chairs, you gonna stay awake
Yes.
regardless.
That's easy.
You're
That's
gonna
easy.
stay awake regardless. But I just want to say thank you to everybody. It was just a great show.
Yes.
I can't wait until we come back on the 15th. And do another
Yes.
episode. But unfortunately, we close it to coming down, winding down to the end. So we want to just thank our listeners for joining us today. And we want to say thank you to
Everyone.
the callers that called in.
Congrats to the gift winners.
Yes,
Yeah.
congrats to the gift winners.
Espresso. You still only get one gift.
Right, that's all right. That's all right. We appreciate her. So we want everyone to know that you have been watching and listening to My Coffee Conversations here at Root Rangers TV, powered by Strong Island Entertainment. And we going to sign out.
Yeah.
Stay strong, safe, stay sweet with your host, Yolanda. And
Danny, the co-host.
It's a coffee conversation. We just want you to stay warm. Grab your favorite cup. Spike it how you like it. And until the next time, let's have a conversation over coffee.
thank you. Good night.
Good night.